So that's what we were talking about last night at the top of the show. And then just as we were going off the air at the end of the show last night, the Trump administration ran to the U.S. Supreme Court. And just before we went off the air, just before the end of last night's show, the Trump administration obtained an order from the Supreme Court saving them from that midnight deadline. Right? So they're less than 3 hours away from that deadline, and the Supreme Court at the very last second steps in and says, no, 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 Trump administration, you don't have to release that funding by midnight after all. And we want briefing on this by noon on Friday. So we'll see what happens by noon on Friday, by tomorrow noon at the U.S. Supreme Court. But because of the Supreme Court's intervention, that USAID funding did not start flowing last night at midnight. And this confrontation and this series of events raises like a whole Niagara Falls of issues and consequences. I mean, first of all, and most importantly, is the substance of it, right? I mean, what's that funding for? Well, among other things, it's for the magnificently successful, world-renowned U.S. AIDS treatment programs that have been interrupted. That puts tens of millions of lives at risk. With that funding not flowing, those programs aren't restarting. The new work that is not being done because that funding hasn't restarted includes little things like, I don't know, work on the previously unknown brand new hemorrhagic fever that has just broken out in Congo. It killed 3 little kids in Congo over the course of 3 days, and then immediately within like 10 more days, the death toll was 53. And now it's in at least 2 different locations in Congo, and they don't know what it is or how it spreads. It is a disease they have never seen before. It does seem to have an alarmingly high death rate, something like a 12% death rate, which for a hemorrhagic fever, an infectious disease, is a massive death rate. And even scarier than that, those it kills, it seems to kill within 48 hours. Right? This is bad. An outbreak spreading fast of a previously undiscovered, unknown hemorrhagic fever that is already killing humans by the dozens. That's the kind of thing that United States global health programs would be all over, usually, to identify this thing, to contain it, to treat people and keep them alive, to stop this thing from spreading, among other things, to make sure that it does not come here to the United States. But we're not doing the foreign aid funding anymore. Stopping USAID means stopping efforts to combat things like that. It also means, you know, stopping America's traditional and leading and totally irreplaceable work to help and contain the damage when not just hemorrhagic fevers break out, like Ebola in Uganda and Marburg in Tanzania, both of which are happening right now, but also to stop things like tuberculosis and malaria. Domestically, here in this country, this confrontation, this drama with the Supreme Court getting involved means that we are about to have the U.S. Supreme Court meaningfully weigh in on this sledgehammer that Trump and his top campaign donor have taken to the U.S. government thus far, with no seeming regard for either the law or the Constitution. So we will see, probably for the first time, how the Supreme Court is oriented toward this radical change that has happened over the last 5.5 weeks in our country. And honestly, this is also important because of the way this came up. That midnight deadline we were looking at last night was set so firmly and so urgently by the federal judge who was hearing this case because he had to do it by motion to enforce. He had to do a motion to enforce because Trump really was ignoring that court's previous orders, right? And so when we look to see how the Supreme Court handles this tomorrow at noon, we're going to be looking to see how the Supreme Court handles that very scary issue.
What I'm thinking about and talking to, my friends at Democracy Defenders and other lawyers about is, could there be a nationwide class action lawsuit to follow up on last week's victories against Musk, against the Trump administration for this breach in computer security and the data of all American taxpayers. It could be a class action suit on behalf of all Americans. If the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers want to opt out and they don't want their part of the money for the contamination of their data, fine, they can opt out. But really, it's a suit on behalf of everybody because that's our information.
Right.
It doesn't belong to Elon Musk or his little midnight crew. It belongs to the people, and the government has to hold it in trust. Now, there's specific statutes which say that information can only be accessed for tax purposes, for the purposes of the internal revenue system, and for no other purposes. What are they using that information for?
Everything now. I really do mean everything, because so we all know about the Dodge, whatever it's called, the Elon Musk bros, the tech bros. Elon turns up to even government meetings, running everything. Here's making, I wasn't aware of this, and thank you Fox News for giving me the information, Jessica Tarlov is there, $8 million a day. Any idea what 8 million of these look like? This is one. 8 million a day. How's that? I thought he was cutting back. So let me do some maths now. 7 times 8 is... I can't do my maths. 64. $64 million a week he makes. I can't even work out how much it is a year. That is how much Elon Musk is making from America right now. And nobody says anything. I thought they were trying to save money. If I see or hear one more person say Elon is doing this for the love of what? 8 million of these a day. And here's the craziest thing. Judge Janine Weinbox, I'll probably drop this ball, okay? Balls to all of it, actually. Judge Janine Weinbox on Fox states she's happy with that. She's sober. Yeah.
Every company.
Well, why didn't they say anything about the 400,000 people who lost their jobs when Bill Clinton was president? Why didn't they complain? Yeah, that was in the 90s. And why?
But they actually went through agency by agency
Oh,
and made...
they did it better. I'm sorry, my turn. They did it better back then. Here's the thing. You've got a congresswoman, I've never heard of her before, Marcy Kaptur. This is a woman who is questioning Elon Musk, a legal immigrant who followed the rules, but she supported 11 million illegals not following the rules, disregarding the laws, and coming into the country so we can educate them, medicate them, house them, and make sure that they're happy here. All right? I don't know how this woman belongs in Congress. And this whole idea, you know, with Sonny Hostin, he's from South Africa. What's he supposed to do? Come out of his mother's womb and say, Ma, I don't like it here. We got to leave South Africa. I mean, this is so stupid. It really is. And in the end, you know, the American people, you talk about the American people, they absolutely support what Donald Trump is doing through Elon Musk. 70% of them say he's following through on his promise.
Poll
okay,
that
and George Soros.
But it's a real poll. It's not astroturf like those town halls.
That's George Soros.
No, don't boom about those quote-unquote astro. Watch the interview with Mike Johnson last night with Caitlin Collins about these astroturf.
Caitlin Collins, now there's a good one.
Is this
Let me
a joke
finish my thought.
of Daily
Now,
Caller
did
fame?
you notice that the liberals are so clueless that you've got the protesters and the Congress people in unison saying the same thing? I mean, they just must meet at the end of a block somewhere in somebody's house and say, we all have to say the same thing, and George will give us money, and we can all protest, and then we'll make sure that Donald Trump never wins again. They are so clueless. It's
He
pathetic.
can't win again. It is done now.
I'm not